In this lecture, we're going to learn about while loops. And this is another construct we have in the C++ programming language to allow us to do repetitive tasks. The syntax for a while loop looks like this. We have 5 parts in our loop. We have the iterator, the starting point, the test, the incrementation, and the loop body. It's just going to be set up differently for while loops. The iterator is declared on the outside, and you see here we have unsigned int I, which is exactly the same type of iterator we've used in the last lecture, but note that you can also use size t here. I am just using unsigned int for this case. After you have your iterator declared, you're going to fall to this part here and say while, open a set of parentheses, and inside you're going to put in your test. After that, you're going to open a pair of curly braces, and inside them, you're going to put the body of your loop. And you're going to do whatever it is you want to do in the loop in there. And after your code to do whatever it is you want to do is executed, you're going to put in your incrementation part after your code. And that's what we have here. And this is the setup we're going to be using for our while loops. Again, we have the iterator declared on the outside, and we can initialize it with whatever it is we want to start with. Then we're going to put in our test. It's going to be within these parentheses, and after that we're going to set up a pair of curly braces, and inside them we're going to put whatever code we want to run in the loop, and then we're going to follow that with our incrementation part. And if we try to run this, we're going to run this line, we're going to declare the iterator I, and it's going to start with 0. So the test is going to run, and 0 is less than 10, and we're going to succeed, and we're going to run the body here. We're going to say I love C++, and after that we're going to run the incrementation part. I is going to become 1. We're going to run the test again. So 1 is less than 10. We're going to succeed. We're going to fall in, print I love C++. We're going to increment again. Then we're going to have a 2 in I here. We're going to run the test again. We're going to say is 2 less than 10. That's going to be true. So we're going to be successful. We're going to fall in the body of the loop. We're going to increment and get a 3. We're going to test against our 3 value. 3 is less than 10. We're going to succeed. We're going to print I love C++. We're going to increment again. We're going to test again, and we're going to say is 4 less than count or 10. We're going to be successful, and we're going to keep running until we increment and get a 9. Once we get a 9, we're going to run the test again, and we're going to say is 9 less than 10. That's going to be successful, so we're going to fall inside, print I love C++. We're going to increment and get a 10, and if we run the test again, we're going to say is 10 less than 10. That's going to fail, and we are going to fall on the outside of the loop, and we're going to run whatever code is on the outside here. This is really how a while loop works, and I hope you can see the similarities between the for loop we have seen. It is really the same thing, we just have different syntaxes to do these things. Okay, if you look at these things, we really have the same pieces of information. It is just different syntaxes that C++ provides to do the same things. And sometimes you're going to find it convenient to use while loops, and sometimes you're going to find it convenient to use for loops, and you're going to have to decide what works better for whatever it is you are working on. For now, we're going to head over to Visual Studio Code and try this out. Okay, here we are in Visual Studio Code. The current project is while loop. We're going to grab our template files, and we're going to go in our project and put those in. And we're going to open this in Visual Studio Code, so let's do that. We're going to open the folder, and we're going to work on while loop here. We are going to open our main CPP file pretty quick, and we're going to get rid of this. And what we're going to do is remove what we don't need. And again, we're going to show you the bad way to do things. You don't really want to do this manually. We want to print I love C++ 10 times. So we're going to build. Let's bring up a new terminal so that we can use this when we run things. And we are going to build with GCC. Let's do that pretty quick. The build is good, so we can clear and run Rooster. And we're going to have I love C++ printed out 10 times. So what we can do is comment this out and use a while loop like we want to do in this lecture here. And as we have seen with the slides, the first thing we need to do is declare our iterator on the outside. So we're going to say size ti, we're going to initialize this with a 0, And that's going to be our iterator declaration. And we're going to say while I is less than the value where we want to stop. And again, we don't want to hard code these values in. So what we're going to say is really const size t, and we're going to call this count and make it uppercase. This is a convention we use to declare constants in C++, but you don't have to make them uppercase. It is just a convention that is going to make your code easier to read for other people. So we're going to put a 10 in here because we want our loop to run 10 times. And we're going to say while I is less than count. And we're going to set up a pair of curly braces. And they are going to delimitate the start and the end of the body of our loop here. And inside, we're going to put in whatever code we want the loop to run multiple times. And the code is now very familiar. We're going to say stdc out. And we're going to print the current iteration. And we're going to say I love C++, stdendl for our new line character. And after that, we will need to put in our own incrementation part. If you forget that, you're going to get something really bad happen. We're really going to look at that later in the chapter. But for now, remember to put the incrementation part. And we're going to say ++I. This is really easy. And we're going to say that this is the test. And this is going to do what we want. But let's go down here and say that loop is done when it is done. So we're going to say loop done. And we're going to say stdendl. And before we run this, we're going to go through it and see how it is going to work. So let's click on this file icon here to close this pane so that we have some breathing room. I am going to open a notepad file we're going to use to see these things really happen. When this loop runs, we're going to initialize the iterator here. What we're going to do is put in a 0, and we are going to run the test to see if 0 is less than 10, and the test is going to be successful. So we are going to fall in here and say 0, I love C++. So let's say that here to make this super clear. Inside the loop, we're going to print this message 0, I love C++. And after we execute this line, we're going to increment. I is going to become 1. We're going to go up again and run the test, and we're going to say is 1 less than count, or is 1 less than 10. The test is going to be successful. We're going to run inside the loop, and we're going to print 1 I love C++. That's what we're going to do here, so let's do that. And after we do that, we're going to run our incrementation part again. I is going to become 2. We are going to run the test. We're going to say is 2 less than 10. That's going to be true, of course. And we're going to fall in the body again and say 2 I love C++. So let's say that. We're going to increment and we're going to get a 3. We're going to run the test again. The test is going to be successful because 3 is less than 10. We are going to fall in here and say 3 I love C++. Okay, so we can really follow this. And we are going to increment to get a 4. And the test is going to say is 4 less than 10. That's going to be true. So we're going to succeed and fall in the body again. And we're going to say 4 I love C++. We're going to keep doing this, and we're going to increment again. We're going to get a 5. The test is going to run again. We're going to say, is 5 less than 10? That's going to be true, of course. And we're going to run the code to print 5 I love C++. We're going to increment again to get a 6. We're going to run the test. We're going to say, is 6 less than 10? That's going to be true, of course, again. And we're going to print 6 I love C++. And we're going to increment to get a 7. We're going to run the test, our iterator. We're going to say, is 7 less than count? That's going to be true. We're going to print the message again and say, 7 I love C++. And we're going to increment again to get an 8. We're going to say, is 8 less than count? That's going to be true. We're going to fall in the body and say, 8 I love C++. We're going to increment to get a 9. We're going to run the test against our 9. Of course, 9 is less than 10, so that's going to be true. We're going to fall inside, and we're going to say 9, I love C++. And after that, we're going to increment again, and we're going to get a 10. Now, if we run the test, we're going to say, is 10 less than 10? And that's going to be false, because 10 is not less than 10. And if the test here fails, we're not going to fall in the body of the loop. Control is going to fall at the end of the loop body, and we're going to print loop done. That's what we're going to say here. We're going to say loop done, and our loop will have run 10 times by the time we print this loop done message here. If you count here, you see that the loop is going to run 10 times, and it is going to say I love C++ 10 times, which is really what we want. Okay, I really had to show you this manually so that you can really see what is happening. But now we can build and run this and let the computer do the heavy duty of running this and showing us all these messages. So the build is going to be successful. Of course, we're going to run Rooster, and it's going to exactly show the same thing we just came up in our trusty notepad file here. You see, it is the same thing. But the beauty is that we don't have to do all these crazy computations again. What we can do is we can even change the count to 100, so it is going to run for 100 times. And that's pretty cool. So we can clear and run Rooster, and it's going to do that 100 times, and that's pretty fast for computers. This is really all we had to share with you in this lecture. The main thing is to learn about the syntax of a while loop. And again, notice that we have these 5 parts that make up our loop. We have an iterator, we have the starting point, we have a test, we have the incrementation part, and we have the loop body. It is just set up differently with a while loop, like we can see here. This is really all we had to share in this lecture. I hope you found it interesting. We are going to stop here in this lecture. In the next one, we're going to learn about huge loops with output, and we're going to see how stdc out can slow down your program. Go ahead and finish up here and meet me there.